Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic journey. And today we'll be working with colored pencils. So you'll need your number 2 or HB pencil, kneaded eraser, and some good quality colored pencils. So we are going to start with the number 2 pencil. If you've got your 2 erasers around, this one is good for colored pencils. But colored pencils don't erase well. So this is one of the reasons why I like to go over ink with you, because I still want you to be thinking ink in the back of your mind. Everything we draw with this gets erased. Remember, graphite and colored pencils do not mix. They don't go well together. So right up at the very top, up in here somewhere, I'm going to do a little arch and say that's where I want his head to go. Somewhere up in there. I want his backside to be pretty close to that edge over there. His little tail wants to go way down to the bottom, almost to the very tip, to the very, very bottom. So there's my perimeters. That's where I want him. And now you just go ahead and do your little, there's his body. It's like a big peanut. Or, I don't know, that's not a peanut. Almost egg-shaped, isn't it? Almost. Cute little finch. Here's his little beak, just a little triangular shape there. These little feet, you can see them kind of on this branch that comes around. They're kind of that little kind of C-shaped, sideways C-shaped little claws. That's his little feet. And his tail comes down, has this little end. Wings. But like I say, your subject matter is not as important as how you place it within your picture plane. You want it nice and big, a good composition, touches or comes close to touching 3 of the 4 sides. And I like these pine needles that kind of come out there. You could throw those in. Nobody cares if they're in the right place, but I kind of like how that kind of brings that texture in there. Now, what's important here is probably, number 1, his face. That's going to be our emphasis area. It's where people kind of rest, where your eye rests. But a lot of it is that texture of his feathers that are in there. So as you're looking at his little face, try to get that eye where the eye goes, the nose where the nose goes, that kind of a thing. When it's in objects that people don't readily recognize, people don't usually say much about it. And this is why the human form is very difficult. It's because everybody knows what the human form looks like. And if you don't do it quite right, they let you know about it. Everybody's a critic. Somewhere just off is his eye, right in there somewhere. Little oval. It's not quite oval, actually. It's got a little end to it. But we can adjust it. Right now, we're just getting our proportions, trying to get everything about where it's supposed to go. And if you wanted to throw in the wings, where they go, the shape of the wings. Cut off his back just a little bit. But again, nothing has to be perfect because there's still a ton of drawing to do on here. And the good thing about this is that it doesn't matter if your feathers are shorter or longer. Nobody cares because nobody's as familiar with those little finches. So I'm just going to kind of block in where the tips of those feathers go. They may not be there. I don't know. But I just want a guideline, something to kind of help me to figure out where some of that goes. And maybe it would help to kind of explain some of this. I don't know if you see this, but this area right here is his other wing as it folds around his body. This is not his backside. This is his backside over here. His head is turned, so it kind of makes it look like he's kind of chunky, but he's not. Feathers will do that too. So that's his other wing. And so when you're thinking about those shapes, look how they kind of flow through. This one comes through and then flows over here. This one will come through and then flow over here. That kind of a thing. So they're all almost even as they flow through. And this one wing overlaps the other wing in the back. That's just about as much detail as you need. Don't put in too much detail. Don't get attached to this drawing. In the back of your mind, be thinking ink. This is like ink. We're gonna go over it with a colored pencil, then we got to get rid of all that graphite. Because remember that graphite and colored pencils do not mix. Graphite wins every time. It muddies them up. The other thing is we want to limit ourselves to how many colors we use. We have a set of 24 here. Depending on your colors, I've got my Prismacolor set is 72. That's a lot of colors. And I don't want to use all those colors because it confuses me. And so rather than be confused, I'm going to limit myself to the colors that I need. I personally do not like to use black by itself. But we need that contrast. We need the dark, dark, darks. And if we layer another color on top of black, then that black won't be so dismal, for lack of a better way to say it. But we need black. So there's black. And we don't have a lot of black, just a little bit. So we got black. And then I'm going to go out on a limb here and do some purple because it's one of my favorite colors. And purple can be blended with all sorts of things. So there's my two darkest ones. Now let's try some lightest ones. What are some of the lightest colors you see? Yellow, of course. There is some yellow in there. You've got two yellows. One is kind of lemony yellow. The other's kind of a golden yellow. Yeah, I think the golden one's going to work for us. If you wanted to use the lemony one, you could, but it's kind of up to you. Again, your colors are up to you. Somebody said red. There is, I don't know if you can see this color in here. It is red, but it's got a kind of a purpley cast to it. I would call that maybe a magenta. And oddly enough, we do have a magenta in here. It's kind of a purpley red. So look at that purpley red. That's your magenta. That purpley red, when mixed with the yellow, will become more red. It'll become like a fire engine red. So if you mix those two, you've got a really great red. But there's some orange in there. Maybe we want to go with the red orange. And so if you look, there's a red orange. And we do have browns. We don't need to mix browns. Sometimes that happens as you mix them. You just get browns. But the brown that's on there either is on the orange side or it's on the blue side. And so you may want to start with a layer of brown and then mix colors on top of that. Of course. So you've got a couple of different browns to use there too. There is one that's just called brown. There's one that's called light brown. And I think I like the light brown because if I need to go darker, I can mix a little black with that. You've got a tan too, but I see some tan, but I'm not going to be real happy with that tan. What else we got that we want in there? Green? Yeah, we could do some green. I would say maybe just a gut feeling without really analyzing it too much. Maybe a yellow green. There's one called jade green. It's not as bright green, so I like that. And we have those little pine needles too coming out. Maybe we'll use a little bit of that. And we might need a little other green in there too. What about blue? Is there any blue in there? Oddly enough, I think I'd like to try some of this aqua green, blue, whatever you call it. It's called aqua green. Got a little bit of blue in it. So is that enough colors for us? What do we got? 2, 4, 6, 8. There's 8 colors right there. Now, I'm not going to start with the black because black is very unforgiving. You can't erase it, you know. I mean, it's kind of unforgiving. Whereas other colors, you can blend other colors and do some things with them. But black is just dark. That's just so. I'm going to set that aside for just a moment, and I'm going to use my purple to do some of the preliminary drawings. So I'm going to start with my purple, and think of this purple almost like your ink pen, where you just want the darkest areas. And so think black and white, don't think color here, just think purple. And remember, when you're doing ink, you leave a lot out. When in doubt, leave it out. So that whole aspect is gonna come in. So I'm going to start, and you can start wherever you want to. I'm going to start with the tip of his little beak there. And I'm just going to do some shading where I'm going to add a couple little values. And also, at the beginning when I was talking about object-driven, you got to remember too that we're not drawing a finch. We're drawing shapes of dark and light, and the finch is going to be there when we're done. So I'm just adding a little bit of this purple. And remember, if it's not there, don't put it in. Leave it out. Don't be afraid to leave a little out. Or you could use a little dot or dash. Because what we're going to do, and let me just show you what we're going to do so you can anticipate this. I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and I'm going to go over it, get rid of the graphite, and what's going to be left is your colored pencil. So when in doubt, leave it out. If you think to yourself, I'm not sure if that should go in there, don't put it in. You can always put it in later. His little eye has a little shine in it, and so I'm just going to leave a little space out inside that eye. It's hard to see because there's graphite in there, but if I got rid of the graphite, you can see the little shine in his eye there. I don't know if I told you guys when we were doing ink, but once you've drawn with ink, you'll never draw the same. And I'm just using zigzags, shading techniques. If you want your little finch to feel soft, remember that feathered line where you just kind of drop your pencil in and give it a little flip. Sometimes I'll do little circles like this, but I'm touching the paper, then off the paper, up on the paper, off the paper. Okay, so I'm doing this at an angle, and that gives me my feathered lines. And if I were to draw with ink, I'd just use these little dots and dashes to get that texture. And that's kind of what you want to do. Think ink. Although it's not as scary as ink. Were you guys scared of ink? I know, it's a little intimidating. So ignore your graphite a little bit, and then just put in what you feel like you need. That purple is going to get covered by other colors. So a little bit of that will come through, but for the most part, this is a guide. It's kind of like the Pirate's Code. It's guidelines. Now you can almost just scribble in everything else, because your feathers, nobody cares if those feathers are exactly in the right place. But if that eye is too low or too high, then people know it. So I'm just going to, now with the side of my pencil, I'm just going to scribble in some values. I'm not really concerned if they're exactly where they're supposed to go. But I'm trying to be as close as I can. And again, I'm still thinking ink. If I want those feathers to come through, I'm going to leave a lot out. Here's those edges of these feathers. And it's just scribbles. Remember, we haven't drawn a line around anything. We're letting the edges take care of themselves. So I don't know what's going on with the feet. I can't really see much. And so I'm just going to put in these little dark shapes and say, well, that's kind of what the feet look like to me. But it's really hard to see. So I'm just drawing what I think I see. There's some really light edges around his feathers. Those are probably going to be the most difficult thing to do. So just leave them out. Draw the shapes that you see of the dark feathers, but leave a little edge. Leave those out. Don't attach them to anything if you don't want to. Just leave them out. And your viewer's eye will make those connections. By the way, you don't need to tell your viewer everything. The other thing is, if you're in about the wrong position, or these aren't in the right place, you can always adjust them from here. If you drew a line around it, that you couldn't adjust. So I think that's the number one mistake people make, is drawing lines around things and then filling it in, because then you limit yourself to what you can do. Here's those feathers, and I'm just going to do these little triangular shapes that kind of overlap each other. Feathers, if you think about feathers, kind of like brick, they kind of overlap each other a little bit. Water is the same way. Waves on the ocean. Once you get the pattern, then everything else kind of falls into place. Like I said, if this isn't perfect, that's okay. You know, much of education is just getting an experience, just learning to love learning for the sake of learning, whatever it is. Nobody expects you to get good at it. Well, I don't anyway. I don't know. I don't know about other teachers. I can't vouch for them, but my whole goal here is just to give you an experience. And hopefully a good experience. So I'm just going to throw in a few little lines. I got to get rid of that graphite. So I'm going to take my kneaded eraser now and just go over the entire drawing. Try to get rid of as much graphite as I can get rid of. And so you're going to end up kind of like a ghost image. It's going to be a very light, purpley image. But you want to get rid of all that graphite, especially with your yellows. You've all done this before. You've drawn something and then colored it with colored pencils and it goes muddy. And that frustrates you. I know, because it frustrates me. So some of the colored pencil does come off, but most of it stays on there. Now we've got our design, our composition is all there. We've got everything I think that we need to get going with this and make it pretty. So now we get to add colors like crazy. I can get rid of my number 2 pencil. It's done. My kneaded eraser is probably done at this point too. I don't think I'm going to need it either. But what I want to do now, overlook it, make sure that it's where you want it. Everything is the way you want it, because we're going to add our contrast. Our contrast, the black, is going to make your things pop. And you don't need much, just here and there. So I'm going to take that black, I'm going to get the eye. And so there's the eye. And just that little bit just makes it pop. All of a sudden you're like, wow. I do want to keep that highlight just over the edge of the eye. The eye is very dark. I'm not sure I can see that little pupil. I'm kind of imagining that I see it, I guess. And anywhere else you think you need some of that black, I'm going to zoom into his head so you can see what I'm doing. You don't have to do it everywhere. Like sometimes you've got shadows within shadows, and your feathers, even though they're dark, they're going to be darker elsewhere. So sometimes I'll just put these little lines in there. So like on some of this fur, I'm just going to put these little feathered lines in there wherever I feel like it's darker. Like I say, you don't have to go everywhere or do all of it. Sometimes just a few lines will make a difference. So, are you thinking ink? If you are, yeah. So just little dots and dashes, like where the darkest areas are, you can leave those in. Just be thinking ink. When in doubt, leave it out. All that. Edges. This is one of the reasons why ink becomes such an important drawing tool, is because it teaches you so much about what not to draw or what you don't have to draw. You just leave it out. So just looking at the shapes of the darkness and throwing those in pretty much as fast as I can, because they're not that big of a deal. If I need to change them, I can still change them. You kind of want to ask yourself, when I'm finally ready to do color, where am I going to start? What color am I going to use? I like to start with the lighter colors, and then I kind of end with the light colors. So you start with the lights, then you add other colors into it, and then you blend with the lighter colors. If you like it smooth, that's how you do it. I get asked that all the time. How do you make it smooth? That's my recipe. Start out light, get your colors in there, and then end with your lights. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start out with this golden yellow. And anywhere that I feel like I need golden yellow, so like his beak, start out there. I'm going to add a little bit to his eye, just a little bit right there. Sometimes you get a little reflected light in there. Any place else, maybe a little bit in his fur, up in, or fur feathers, whatever those things are. What are you going to get if you take yellow and violet and mix them? Yeah, hopefully a little gray. So as you start going in there, go over the top of some of that violet with your yellow and see what happens. Look at that gray that I'm getting right in there. That's what I want to do in this whole part of his head. So I'm going to add some violet in there next, and then I'll go back into it and see if I can mix some colors to get it to go gray. But purple and yellow make a great gray. So look what's happened to that purple as I go over the top. Now that looks like gray. But if you were to use gray, it wouldn't look that way. So there's a lot of yellow in there. If I add some reds and browns, it's going to go over the top of that yellow. Even if I had purple, it's going to turn kind of gray. Anyway, the last color you layer is going to be your dominant color. So I'm just putting some yellow in there. Wherever I feel like a little of that yellow should go. Not everywhere, but just in certain places. I know that looks kind of weird and you wouldn't think, oh, I'm going to add yellow in there. But watch what happens to that yellow when we start putting purple in there. So I'm going to take that purple back in here, the side of my pencil. I'm just going to add that over the top of that entire section. Unless it's really light. If it's really light, like around his eye, there's a little light on the bottom. But look how that purple tends to kind of feel gray. Some of it is purple, some of it over the yellow looks gray. Isn't that crazy? You're still looking at the purple? Yeah, well, we're going to add some more colors to it. We want to tone it down. But remember, color's not important here. Value is important. Here's some purple over that yellow there. A little over that black so it gets nice and dark. Then we're going to add some orange to that, or some red violet, or red orange. And it'll be lovely, and you'll be amazed. You still want it to be a little purple though, because we're doing color here. So just to kind of, because I'm excited about this, I'm going to go over that purple, over that yellow with some of this red orange. And if you want it to go a little redder, add a little pressure to it. And it doesn't always work out, but that's the joy of that too. Sometimes you're like, oh, that's better than I thought it was going to be. And other times it's like, oh, I won't do that again. It's all about learning. Nothing wrong with that. Try some of that magenta into it, that kind of purpley, pinky color. It'll turn more red with the yellow. And over the purple, it'll turn more of a red violet. Now I'm going to put some of this magenta, oddly enough, kind of around the eye, and just here and there. You don't have to have it everywhere. But you can see what's going to happen to this as we draw, and it becomes more, we get more form using our values and our colors. You can go back and forth until it's about what you want it to be. And this is just purple going back over the yellow, back over that magenta. And it gives you the feel of gray without being gray. That yellow is canceling out the purple, but it still is a little purple. We like that purple. All those colors are kind of blending together to give you the right values. The head's almost done. We can always come back into it if we need to. And now what you want to do is go color crazy on the body. Just whatever colors you feel like you need. I'm going to start with that light brown in some of those areas, because the light brown over the top of the yellow with the red, it's going to be beautiful. Oh, I can't wait to get to that magenta color. All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Magenta. Whatever colors you feel like you need, just go ahead and lay those in. And if you don't agree with my colors, you think, oh, Mr. Lowe, I wish I had blue or something, then go for it. I love that sky blue. That's one of my favorite colors. Maybe I'll put a little of that in here. See what happens. That's kind of pretty. That sky blue that's in there. You probably notice I'm not following the feathers exact. That's not important. And nobody will have this scrap to look at your picture. They'll just have your picture. So what do they compare it to? Doesn't matter. Now, just for argument's sake, I'm going to add a little bit of green to some of this. And if you notice how it kind of changes that, it tones it down. You still have a little bit of green to that because your top color, whatever you layer down first or last, is the dominant color. That's the thing that gets the most light. So what if I went over that again with the red? Would it go browner? The answer is yes, but it also turns more red. So if you have red dominant, keep the dominant red, do that last. And if it's more of a green dominant, put that last. Or if it's not either one of them, try some purple over the top of it. So the purple is what's going to give it that darkness. Don't be afraid to layer in that purple, especially towards the end. Give it some pressure to really darken it up. My little finch looks like he got in the finch cookie jar. One too many times. So right in front of our finch, right over here, is a good place for your signature. Don't go right on the edge. Kind of come up a little bit, because that is part of your composition. Hopefully you enjoyed this, though, and hopefully you learned little bit about color that maybe you didn't know in the past. I had a little bit more experience with drawing forms with color. And hopefully, somewhere down the line, art has made your life a little bit better.